I'm Vitalik Buterin, and you're watching Doom Debates.
I'm excited to talk with Vitalik about DAC, Decentralized Democratic Defensive Acceleration.
I would feel more confident in any ecosystem where there is some collection of different agents that are kind of aligned.
This is tractability-washing the problem.
It's very possible that superintelligent AI alignment is intractable.
Vitalik Buterin, what's your P-Doom? Welcome to Doom Debates. My guest, Vitalik Buterin, is the mother-frickin' inventor of Ethereum, which is the #2 cryptocurrency in the world after Bitcoin by market cap, currently valued at $500 billion. And it's also a general-purpose blockchain platform for decentralized applications. Vitalik is a top philanthropist who supports many causes, including human longevity research, existential risk mitigation, especially AI X risk, pandemic prevention and mitigation, and he's donated a whopping $665 million worth of Shiba Inu tokens toward COVID relief programs in India. Finally, he is a thought leader on a wide range of topics, including economics, governance, institution design, and AI. I'm excited to talk with Vitalik about P-Doom and what can be done to lower it, especially his idea known as DAC, or Decentralized Democratic Differential Defensive Acceleration. Vitalik Buterin, welcome to Doom Debates.
Thank you so much, Liron. It's great to be here.
You have many writings and talks. They're focused on Ethereum, blockchain systems, applied cryptography, institution design. What would you say is a central thread of your intellectual and productive career?
I think if I had to narrow down all of the goals of all of the different writings and projects that I've done into one sentence, I would have to say it's about building a more free and open world, but particularly in a way that actually works for people and that isn't just about ideology for the sake of itself, but about something that actually makes the world better.
Yeah, I want to tell the viewers, there's a couple things I really like about what you've been doing besides inventing Ethereum. So it's like this combination of theoretical and applied institution design work. And then it's also altruism, right? I mean, you're donating your money, you're encouraging other people to donate their money, you're setting a great example of how to use money to help people. That is quite a good mix. Do you have a good example of one of the beneficiaries of this kind of funding?
The Balvi Fund, this is what came out of the dog money from the 2021, those dog coins that turn into way more money than I expected. And it's ended up funding this global effort to try to support like very full spectrum and fully open source biodefense, like basically, interrupting pandemics at every step. The biggest grantee that we've had is Open Water. It's basically making medical imaging personal scale. The idea is it's like a device that you can wear and then it uses ultrasound. And the use case that we got excited for is being able to detect microclots, which are a common cause of long COVID. But then we realized that actually, like this is super general purpose technology, right? Actually, it even has applications for BCI, interestingly enough, right? Because it's the exact same kind of stuff. You just point it at your brain instead of pointing it at a couple of blood vessels. I don't think something at this level of like funding and sophistication in at least this industry has been open sourced before. And I like this year and next year, it's actually, like they have a product and it's starting to have customers.
Hell yeah. The other thing that's salient to me, going back through your work, you're all about high quality discourse in a way that's pretty rare. You're open to dialogue, you're always truth seeking, you write in a very candid way. And then in the crypto space where it's so easy to overhype and pump your bags, you never did that, right? You were always like a very straight shooter. I think, everybody knows you're like low ego, which is pretty impressive. And then just in general, it would be so easy for somebody with your following to build an echo chamber and pump your ego, right? That's kind of like a natural tendency. But you have just remained, very humble. You're coming on podcasts like this, you're in the arena, I'm not going to pull my punches if I disagree with you. And you're totally cool with it because you value, you think high quality discourse is productive, right?
Absolutely. Actually, the rationalist community, especially, and with people like Eliezer, Yudkowsky, and Scott Alexander that, I know you're a fan of as well, has been a really important, I think, teenage influence of mine in that regard. A lot of the things that they really held up as high virtues, things like intellectual honesty, this concept of, like meta level values, like basically, yeah, trying to build a world in such a way that you're not making things horribly wrong, even if you're wrong about a lot of issues. Altruism as well, right? And trying to sort of see things from the bigger picture and not just kind of be a soldier of a particular tribe. These kinds of things, like basically, I grew up reading when I was in high school, and I think they're just this moral example that I've always strived to follow.
Nice.
Mm.
So you basically first discovered less wrong when you were in high school.
I think so, yeah.
How much do you play prediction markets?
Actually quite a bit. I do have a poly market portfolio. I'm one of these Doctor No people. Like I basically find questions that people are just obviously overexcited about. The
Oh
most
yeah.
fun one I made some money on last year was there was a market on whether or not there would be a civil war in the UK in 2024. I think this started because Elon tweeted, like, there will definitely be a civil war. How many civil wars has the UK
Right.
had in the last 10 decades, right? The base rate is definitely much less than once per decade, right? And so I said, a click buy. Like, doing this kind of stuff is definitely one of my many side hobbies.
Nice. Yeah, makes sense. Definitely a common hobby in the rationalist sphere. What's your overall opinion of Eliezer and Miri?
I actually really highly respect Eliezer. I think a lot of the writing that he wrote in the sequences, like it made things clear for me in a lot of ways that all kinds of other writing did not, right? And rationalism sometimes gets criticized for in like very straw many ways, right? It's like, oh,
Hmm.
oh,
Yep.
rationalists, they would defraud people for $5 billion to fund their effective altruism charities. But then, we have Eliezer and Scott on record writing lots of things that would directly contradict what Sam did, right? And so, yeah, I respect him for that. Miri did a lot of important foundational work for AI safety, and I'm glad that the space is also now big enough where it similarly managed to be far beyond just them. So generally quite positive.
What do you think of Eliezer's thesis that if anyone builds it, everyone dies, referring to superintelligent AI?
It's his worldview was definitely one of the worldviews that I consider very plausible, and it's definitely something that worries me.
I think it's really great that you're coming out and saying that you deeply respect Eliezer because some people throw shade on him. Obviously, not me, but I've seen some people in the tech community throwing shade and even going so far as to be like, oh, Doomer, he's just trying to make money, right? Like this is like his shtick or whatever. And a lot of those same people actually deeply respect you and your decentralization ideals and your system design. So by the transitive property of respect, seeing that you respect Eliezer, I think that a lot of those people should take a second look.
I think they absolutely should, right? Though I think in this case, one of the challenges, right, is that like once you become part of a machine that has things like money. It has things like human beings that are dedicated to the organism and see it as being part of their identity. It's you definitely need more than just logic to convince people, but at the same time, it's good to be optimistic and definitely hope that logic and reason can just continue to be a common ground, and both sides can continue being convincible of new things.
Agreed. So we're heading into the real meat of the discussion here. Let's kick it off with the number one question that everybody wants to know. You ready for this?
Ready.
P Doom, P Doom, what's your P Doom? What's your P Doom? What's your P Doom?
Vitalik Buterin, what's your P Doom?
About 12% right now.
Oh, really? 12. I think maybe it started at 10 and then it got lower for a while, right? So now it's
Mhm,
back up.
mhm.
Okay, yeah, what happened?
I think in geopolitics becoming just much worse and more stupid over the past year or so was definitely a big part of it, right? I think that's one of those variables that determines whether or not the world cooperates, or even individual countries within the world even feel like cooperating regardless of what everyone else does. So that's been a big update for me. I think another one is that some of the paths that would have led to much longer timelines ended up being closed up for me, right? So I think
Mm.
the existence of things like chain of thought, my timelines have definitely been, I think, compressed somewhat by that. So I will say that like most of my PDOOM mass is in the probably pre-2050 period. And like
Yeah.
basically, yeah, the more you make my timelines go higher, the more my or longer, the more my PDOOM drops. And then similarly, if they go shorter, then PDOOM goes up. It even went up even higher at the start of the year. Like I think at the start of the year, it was like 15 or 16%. It felt like the whole agent and COT stuff could go like even further and even faster. And at the same time, the political side of the world looked like it would break even more. Though it does feel like both of those variables have calmed down somewhat.
I want to refine PDOOM a little bit. So you said it's like 12%, and you said that if timelines were longer, then it would be lower. Let me throw a pin in 2050. So what if I define Doom as everybody is dead, like humanity is extinguished by 2050? Is that roughly what your 12% refers to?
Okay, yeah, let me think about this. I think, well, like what percent of that is Doom being pre-2050? At least 9.
Yeah, sure, sure. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
because when I talk about PDOOM, my position is like I think by 2040, there's roughly a 50-50 chance that it's all over. So I'm like a 50% doomer. But I also think it's not like it's a hard 50. It's not like 50.000, right? It's obviously a very vague. When I say 50, what I'm really saying is I think it's kind of crazy for people to say like 1 or 2% or 0.1%. And I also think it's kind of crazy for people to be like 99%. So like I feel confident that I'm sane in terms of having the right order of magnitude. I think 10 to 90%, as famously Jan Lakey from OpenAI was saying, oh, my PDOOM is 10 to 90%. To me, that captures the sane zone. To me, it starts to get not sane if you're outside that zone.
Yeah, I think, and there's definitely, lots of smart people at all kinds of places. I mean, there's also smart people who are outside the sane zone in both directions, right? Whom I definitely respect, but I definitely, have this general intuition that, people who say probabilities of really complicated things in the world being very close to zero or very close to 100% or being overconfident about something.
You signed the famous Center for AI Safety statement on AI risk, the one that says mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. What was your reasoning there?
I do think that the risk of extinction from AI and even sub-extinction level very bad things that could come from AI are something that's clearly very important to watch and pay attention to. This is clearly an incredibly powerful technology. What I call the standard story of AI doom, basically the combination of very rapid capability growth and the orthogonal finality thesis, instrumental convergence, just leading to a super powerful AI just wanting to kill us, not because it wants to, but because, we're made of atoms that it could rearrange into something else. Like, it makes enough sense, and I've just never heard of a super amazing knockdown argument against it. And I think if you pair that with the fact that the portion of society that's thinking about how to make this kind of thing less likely to be a risk or a problem is definitely quite a bit smaller than it should be given how fast capabilities are going. Like it's clearly something important that we should pay attention to and like view with that level of care and concern.
So this statement came out in 2023, so a couple years ago now. Are you happy with how it kind of built mutual knowledge that all of these luminaries all agree that it's risky?
I think so. It definitely did a good job of making the topic mainstream in a very positive way, right? And I think what things like that statements did is it helps to show that like actually worry about AI risk is a very mainstream thing that's within the field. And I think that did a lot to help bring the public around to the view that this is very mainstream and like not at all fringe to worry about. And so, no, it's, yeah, I think it's been definitely a valuable part of the discussion in that way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think a lot of the work of mitigating doom starts with moving the Overton window, where people just realize that everybody else is also on the same page of like, hey, this super intelligent AI thing seems like a real concern, as opposed to like totally ignoring it, which most people are still doing.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about AI timelines. I know you've got some thoughts there, so I'll just throw it at you. When is AGI or ASI most likely coming?
I'll start with my definitions of AGI and ASI because they're somewhat bespoke. So, my
Sure.
definition of AGI is AI that is powerful and general enough that if you were to suddenly upload it into robot bodies and all human beings suddenly disappeared at the same time, it would be able to independently continue civilization. That's very clearly the moment at which we're not just dealing with a tool, we're actually dealing with a species, and where we're dealing with something where it's no longer unambiguous that humans are the top dog, right? Like you actually have two different entities, both of which could do their own thing absolutely on their own if they had to.
Yeah.
That's AGI. And then for ASI, my definition of ASI is AI that is powerful enough that basically human beings can no longer contribute, like even an assistance to performance for any task other than tasks where human beings are just explicitly valued in that task for being human. One of the motivating analogies here is if you look at chess, then computers got better than like average professionals at chess sometime around, like you could say, about 1980.
Hmm.
Then computers got better than the world's best chess player, the famous Deep Blue versus Kasparov match in 1996. But then computers got so powerful that computer alone beat a human plus computer, so it was called a
Right.
centaur. That happened in 2017, right? So there was actually a 20-year regime during which human plus AI was the most optimal combination.
How did you know it was 2017? Because I actually looked this up once and I couldn't find a definite year
Mm.
on that.
I think, okay, so I remember there was an article by Tyler Cohen talking about centaurs in like the early to mid 2010s that definitely talked about it as not a dead concept. And then I remembered people very recently talking about
Right.
like basically centaurs as a dead concept. And at some point, actually, I just
Right.
asked the AI and it just gave 2017 as a cutoff date.
I mean, I
Um,
have to believe by this point, I don't think a centaur helps just because, it'd be kind of crazy if it did. But you could have a situation like, remember AlphaGo kind of got hacked, right? Like somebody beat AlphaGo by like doing something really unexpected or something. So I can imagine maybe the only role of the human centaur is still to be there and like avoid somebody doing something way out of distribution.
Very possible, yeah. But if you look at the way human AI collaboration works today, yeah, like even my own experience as a coder, right? It's like before AI coding was 90% bug fixing, now coding is, or 80% bug fixing, now coding is 95% bug fixing. But my 95% confidence for AGI, I think when I was asked this about a year and a half ago, it was 2027 to 2200.
Okay. I mean,
If we were
95% is a huge confidence. So it makes sense that your interval would be wide. I wouldn't even ask you for 95%.
think like I have probably like two large kind of estimates that overlap quite a bit. Actually, distribution maybe looks two peak, but the biggest part is single peak, and it's kind of in this zone where it could be like 5 to 10 years away. It could be 30 years away, and I look at this as like there being two kind of stories that are describing AI progress. The first story is a story where basically, yeah, right now there's, we're on the train. where I mean, this isn't quite your doom train, but it is definitely a train whose destination stop is being like thrown off and immediately thrown onto a doom train right as it's already getting off the cliff. But the train is, that there's rapid growth in capabilities, there's rapid growth in investment, there's enough of a self-sustaining industry that every problem is quickly being solved. The dominating kind of exponential chart that you would follow is this chart of how long are the activities that an AI can take in terms of like the time it would take for a human to evaluate them, right? And this kind of evaluates, independent agency and independent ability to do things without human assistance. And it's been doubling roughly once every 7 months, and then sometimes, there's signs that that might even be accelerating, and then,
Yeah, just to clarify for the viewers, you're talking about the chart where it's saying like how long of a task can you have a human versus an AI, where the AIs are beating the humans. Like maybe they can beat the humans for like a 2-hour task, but then if it gets longer, then the human takes the lead.
Right. If you follow that chart, then basically the time at which that time intersects with a full human career looks like it might be in the early to mid 2030s, right? And then, like, you could also see that even accelerating because as it becomes more and more clear that actually AI is a really big deal, then like people keep putting more and more resources into it, and you could easily see this being like double-digit percentages of GDP, yeah, even within a couple of years. And then AI gets to human level, and even before that, I mean, we get AI researchers accelerate AI progress, and then it just like very quickly fooms, and then it blows right past the human level, and very quickly goes super intelligent, right? The other one of my two stories is the story where basically, yeah, the thing that we're doing this decade is doing a bit of a replay of what we did in the 1970s, where in the 1970s, basically, people got really excited because like AI was able to do things like math, calculation, a lot of these like rote tasks that could be formally specified and just blew past them at a very superhuman level, right? And people's intuitions were like, oh, it's really hard for humans to calculate 100 digits of pi in our heads. This computer can do it, and so how hard can it be for a computer to tell apart a cat from a dog, right? And like at the time, there was a lot of this like thought that like maybe yeah, AGI is actually yeah like only 5 or 10 years away, right? And that ended up not being true. What ended up being true is like we ended up being very good at automating one subset of human capability, but then there were these other sets of human capability that were still very far away. And the story is that, well, maybe we're repeating the exact same thing, except it's kind of more subtle, like what the category divide is. And like there's different ways to make that divide. Like you can talk about, like interpolation versus extrapolation, kind of operating within domain versus, like some making things that are very fundamentally new. I think the best formalization of this is probably still like Francois Chollet's ARC Prize, but like even if the ARC Prize ends up falling this year, like that doesn't invalidate the story. I think like the central use case that I think will still be hard. This is annoyingly hard to measure. Is I think I'm very confident that within 2 years, AIs will not be able to independently start a new large scale online business. Um,
Yeah, that's a good milestone.
Yeah, it's just like this very complete, very comprehensive task, right? That involves interacting with the environment, solving technical problems, solving business problems, solving, human coordination problems, right? And so the question is like, what if, like, basically in the 2020s, we're seeing a boom of AIs getting really good at these tasks that you might call, like within distribution, work, interpolation, and a lot of tasks fall into that category, but there's still this kind of somewhat more illegible subset that humans are more just naturally good at. And then the story is like, well, we're actually going to blow past those eventually, right? And the reason why I say 2050 is there was this other interesting analysis I remember from, I think maybe about a couple of years ago, where people looked basically, if you estimate what is the amount of compute that went into the process of evolution and the amount of compute that goes into an individual human life, then the first one is bigger, right? And then you say, well, when is the amount of compute going into AI going to blow past that? And it looks like about like mid-century is the answer, right? And then the argument is, well, you know, life by itself created something as powerful as us once by basically just like very naively stirring a big computational soup for about I think it's like 10 to the 40 steps, and then we came out, right? And so maybe if we just kind of fumble around and do roughly the same thing, then after 10 to the 40 steps, like something like us will come out, right? And so, like, yeah, it's a plausible argument. Basically, the closer we get to that, like it'll be a combination of the two. But like I could see, AGI and then coming out of that, and then ASI probably taking somewhat longer.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If you
Mm.
just had to guess which
Isn't
year AGI is coming by your definition of like, oh, it could
mm,
sustain its own civilization, what's
mm,
your mainline year for that?
probably 2030s.
Right. I mean, I think that's kind of the consensus of people who are looking at it. That does seem like a
Right.
good mainline guess. I guess early 2030s would be the most popular answer.
Right. Yeah. And I think, there's some chance it's that. There's some chance it's late 2030s. And then I think there's some chance that, like, we get something that meets this definition of AGI, but then it actually takes quite a long time for it to get to the ASI level. Right. And, like, say it turns out that the 21-year time for chess, like, it turns out that it actually takes, like, that long for, or potentially even longer for AI to break through. Right. So, from like the AGI level to ASI. So I think a lot of those things are possible, right? And like I want to work on things that are valuable in like a large subset of those possibilities.
How would you describe what current AIs lack compared to true AGI? Like LLMs, people love to diss LLMs. Remember when they'd call them a stochastic parrot? I feel like that term is going out of favor as people realize, like, okay, it's got to be more than that. It's doing some pretty sophisticated functionality that involves like deeply understanding the meanings of things besides just statistics. So they're mostly not calling it a stochastic parrot. But what do you think is fundamentally still the limitation of LLM based systems?
So the pattern I notice when I use them is I notice that AI is amazing at helping me navigate domains that are well trodden by humanity, but where I'm a noob. Right. So one example of this is like Android development. Like I've just never really done Android development before. And then I this year decided to just make a couple of like simple productivity apps for myself. And like it helps me through it. And like I was able to actually like make something basic in 1 to 2 hours, and that would have just been unimaginable before. But I find AI is close to useless, sometimes absolutely useless in domains where I'm a top 1,000 domain expert.
Right.
And especially, these like very new domains, right? Things like, cryptography is probably one of the big examples, and like some of the crazier, ZK snark type of stuff. Basically, I think one of the limitations is that to achieve a high level of quality, it's still dependent on a large number of training examples, right? And so this is where this kind of intuition that, they're good at something that you might kind of analogize to interpolation, but they're bad at things that you would analogize to extrapolation comes out. I mean, also system one versus system two thinking is one of those analogies. Like,
Mm.
they're better at things that are more like instinct than like deep thought, and especially and deep original thought.
Right. But O3 is pretty impressive, the kind of chain of thought systems or the reasoning models, because it does think and then take an action and then, like, like search the web, like pull up a bunch of documents, like analyze them, think about what to do next. So I feel like that system too.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. But it definitely gives answers that score extremely highly on impressiveness, but often score much lower on like utility to me. Right. Like I give it hard problems. Like I have a new laptop that has a 5090 on it because I want to do local AI stuff. And I have Linux, and I have Linux compatibility issues, and like solve them for me. And it keeps coming up with these like amazingly clever plans that seem like they show a deep understanding of Linux and what to do, but then I do them and then they don't work. I do them again and they don't work, right?
5090 is a GPU.
Yes, it's like basically the most powerful type of GPU that you can get that's inside of a laptop.
Nice.
the fact that the weakness that it has is like of this type is very relevant from an AI safety perspective, right? Because one of the big arguments for risk is this kind of super intelligent FOOM issue, right? Where basically the AI can do really amazing things in the context of our current world and our current science, and then it can create the next wave of science, and then it can do even better things, and it create the next wave of science after that, right? But then if the AI is the way that I've just described, AI being today, then what would actually happen today is it does amazing things using the current wave of science, and then it invents the next wave, and then it starts doing things with that. And then now that it's a little bit out of distribution, it just starts completely fumbling and then it screws up, right? And so for both any kind of super progress to happen and for anything really risky to happen, like it does really have to cross that gap.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Using LLMs today, they have a lot more trouble giving good answers outside of being similar to documents they've seen. I mean, I definitely know what you mean. It's just always weird to me because, the next version comes out and they just somehow get better, right? It's like, they're obviously not fully good, but it's like, I hesitate to make any confident predictions about, like the next year.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
I agree with that,
yeah,
right? And I think to be clear, like I'm definitely very against these kinds of dismissive theories of AI that say, yeah, AI is just X and human beings are something more profound. Like, I think if you have some kind of reductive theory that says, like AI is just X, then I think there's one of three things that are true. Thing one is actually, yeah, AI, yeah, already, yeah, is not just X. Thing two, possibility two is AI will soon be not just X, and possibility three is well, actually humans are also just X, right?
right.
Um, like there's that lovely, yeah, internet meme that was like, hey, yeah, don't mind the tiger. It's just something that's made out of atoms, and it knows that you're made out of atoms, and it's just trying to helpfully rearrange
Right.
some of them for you, right? So
Exactly. It's,
like,
it's just
yeah, like
math.
exactly. Like, I'm very against these kind of attempts to be dismissive of AI in a very categorical way. Like, I think the weaknesses that I talk about, they're true of AI today. They definitely will not be true of AI at some point in the future. At some point in the future, AI will be able to do either all of the things that humans do, or or some of the things that humans do, plus enough things that are a replacement of capabilities that maybe it never just needs to get because there's even better paths to the same goal. And the question is like basically, yeah, like when and in what format it'll reach that.
Exactly. There's some people, famously Roger Penrose, but also a lot of people in my YouTube comments, who think that consciousness is a firewall between current AIs and humans. Do you think that that is going to stop AIs from having human-like functionality if they're not conscious?
Um, No. And my theory is that it's very likely that AIs will eventually be conscious. Like I'm one of these, I forget, I don't know the name, but like algorithmically centered people. So I believe consciousness is a property of algorithms of a certain type. And so
Yeah.
humans are conscious, and simulations, like if we get uploaded into computers, then the upload is going to be conscious as well. My argument for this is basically, yeah, kind of step one is like I don't believe in P zombies, right? So P zombies are this
Yeah.
fancy term for basically like entities that act like people and have everything in common with people except for not being conscious. And the reason why I don't believe in them is like actually consciousness is not just purely a metaphysical property. Consciousness is a property that influences the physically observable world. And the way that it influences the physically observable world is that there's lots of people that talk about consciousness. Words that get written down that are collections of atoms that appear in a particular pattern in the universe, right? And so it's like feels extremely Occam's razor unintuitive that like you would have entities be able to make that like write things that talk about consciousness without actually being conscious, right? And so if you accept step one, then step two, like if you believe that it's possible to simulate the laws of physics at all, right? If basically if you believe the laws of physics are laws, then you should be able to implement them in silicon. And then if you implement them in silicon, then humans evolve in about the same in exactly the same way. And then they believe they end up talking about consciousness inside of silicon, right? And then if you accept those two things, then that implies that it is possible to have consciousness inside of silicon. Then the next question is, well, will AI be that type, right? And the basic argument is like we evolved consciousness at some point in time because consciousness was useful to us, probably because it enables like certain forms of agency to be more effective. And AI is being increasingly built for agency, and also AI is being built by mimicking humans and getting lots of training data from humans. And so we get like basically two vectors that select for consciousness. And so there's some chance that that'll actually lead to consciousness. And of course,
Right.
also some chance it won't.
Yep, I agree with everything you said, and that point you made about P zombies. I think we're both reading the same source here, right? Eliezer's written very eloquently on this. I'll put it in the show notes. The less wrong P zombies sequence. So it sounds like you don't have like a hardcore principle. You don't have a firewall saying current LLMs can never break through this firewall. Just some firewalls I haven't even mentioned. Some people say, oh, it's not truly reasoning, right? It's not truly agentic. We covered it's not truly conscious. It sounds like you don't have a firewall. You're just open to having it extrapolate in a number of different ways, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Likewise. Likewise. Let's talk about headroom above human intelligence, or in other words, how powerful do you expect ASI to eventually become, say in 100 years?
Mm. Yeah, I think quite a bit above human intelligence. One of the arguments against this, right, of course, is that each IQ point only gives you like 1% extra income, and then potentially it even levels off past 140 or 160, and then maybe like actually if you go above 160 you start going as an inevitable byproduct kind of crazy in some counterproductive ways, and so maybe we're at the cap, right? Like this is the standard argument, that one of the arguments that people would give against. The other argument against that I've heard is like if you actually compare, like neurons to thermodynamic limits. I remember there was an article on this, and I think that one gave the impression that we're like somewhere between like 3 to 8 orders away from of magnitude from being optimal. The reason why the IQ stuff doesn't seem persuasive to me is because I think like IQ type intelligence gains are not the only way that AI can be better than humans.
Hmm.
The most natural other approach is just like basically clock cycle time, right? Like if you just imagine an AI that has an IQ of 125, but that can think 10,000 times faster than we do, right? So, like basically, in the time that it takes for me to say, a word, like it's going to be able to finish saying something of the length of half of this podcast, then like that's something that definitely can outthink humans and run circles around humans and lead to like very fast economic doubling times and all kinds of things. It actually gets really spooky in interesting ways, right? I think one of
Yep.
the observations from Robin Hanson's book on the Age of M that really stuck with me is how if you think 1,000 times faster than humans, then the subjective speed of light drops to 300 kilometers a second. And then if you think 1,000,000 times faster than humans, the subjective speed of light drops to 300 meters per second. And so basically, in some ways we sort of go back to ancient times when, the cities were far away and like you had to basically, go between, like messages had to go between on horses, right? From the perspective of us, like everything would just be like zooming in crazy, things would happen, right? So I definitely think quite a bit of headroom.
Yeah, there's this very striking visual when you think about plants. Plants have like a rich inner life. They like bend toward the sun. They do kind of move in how they grow. It just happens over like a really slow time scale. And when you put them head to head versus an animal, it's not exactly a fair fight.
Absolutely.
So I do think I do honestly expect to see that kind of phenomenon, actions per minute, right? It's like the AI is going to play the game of life with much higher actions per minute than you and I do.
Yep, that's. It's something that many different forms of AI are doing already, right?
Yeah.
I think unfortunately there's like some even pretty dark things that create incentives in exactly that direction. I'm sure both of us have been following the rise of drone and AI assisted warfare. We're definitely not quite there yet, right? Like the theme this year has been, fiber optic drones, which are basically human-powered drones that literally have 20-kilometer cables sticking out the back, so they're still controlled by human operators. But like 20-kilometer cables are friggin' annoying, and there's just lots of pressure to remove the need for a human operator, right? And so then,
Yeah.
like for in that kind of competitive game, once it gets to bot versus bot, then like reducing reaction time becomes incredibly important, right? And the other big one is finance, right? You could imagine just there being incentives to push reaction times even further down. So yeah, like I definitely think we're going to go there.
Okay, so what about the sci-fi stuff? Like nanotech, and some people give Eliezer a lot of flack for proposing this, but I'm on board with it. It's just the idea that the AI will do things that to us feel like science fiction, but they're basically accessible new types of technologies that we haven't gotten to yet. Like we haven't gotten to nanotech, but in principle, like Eric Drexler's book about nanotech, in principle, it seems like the AI should be able to figure out how to do this kind of thing pretty quickly without necessarily like many years of research. What do you think?
Yeah, this nanotech in particular is one of those things that I have big uncertainty about, right? Because in a lot of senses, nanotech is kind of a superset of everything. It's a superset of pandemics. It's a superset of drones. It's a superset of data centers, and it's like theoretically extremely powerful. But then on the other hand, I have this nagging instinct that if there were like very low molecule count things that could have some of those properties, then life and evolution would have figured them out by now. And like, I definitely feel a little bit out of my depth in evaluating this kind of thing. And then I think there's also just kind of the like I kind of look at outside of you things, right? And then there's just like the
Yeah.
empirical facts that this stuff was theorized as being a big deal in the 1990s, but then since then, like it's just stopped being a theme, and we've like somehow like stopped making much progress on it. So it could be the case that AI is the thing that actually discovers everything and discovers how to do it super well, or it
Mhm.
could be the case that there's like fundamental and like thermodynamic instability of small molecule configuration type of reasons why that stuff is fundamentally limited. I mean, wide distribution for me.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that is fair enough. Like, what can we learn from the fact that it doesn't seem like there's been much nanotech progress, that at least not that I've heard of. So that's very interesting. To your other point about observing that life hasn't discovered new types of nanotech, I guess, besides like the familiar types of like stuff in cells. I would point out that, life is very constrained, like the tech tree, like the build path, right, of cells. It's like you have to work with proteins, right, that are coming from amino acids. And Eliezer points out, their bonds are very weak. They're using van der Waals forces. So, like, they don't really operate with the full spectrum of ways you could put molecules together.
Yeah, okay. So here's one argument I would make, and like actually, if you've come up with an amazing rebuttal, then like I would be, like I would enjoy being enlightened. Is basically okay. So if something is more efficient than life, then chances are it would needs to happen by being smaller than life. The probability of abiogenesis, intuitively speaking, should be exponential with exponent with base lower than one in the complexity of the thing, right? Because if you have even one extra component that needs to be added for like a basic replicator to be possible, then the number of things that need to come together at the same time by pure chance increases by one, and so it takes like maybe twice or some number of times as long, right? And so plausibly, abiogenesis, just with very high probability, created the simplest possible thing that is capable of being a replicator, right? And so
Yeah, exactly. That's basically what I'm saying. Yeah.
right. But then the question is, like if there are other types of things that evolution can't reach, like I agree, there's lots of very valuable things that evolution can't reach. Like, there's a reason we don't have, zebras that shoot lions with machine guns, right? It's, or wheels for that matter, right? But then intuitively, it's more likely to be more efficient if it's simpler in some way. And if it's simpler, then like why wouldn't abiogenesis have produced it first? And then if it's more complex, then like, are we even sure that it would actually be more efficient than like and be able to outcompete life?
Right. Okay. But you do agree that in general, when you have a human engineer at a workbench, they have quite a lot of options that the process of evolution won't have.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right, fair enough. The reason I bring up the sci-fi stuff is just so from my perspective, and by the way, I'm also hunting for like a disagreement because I do think you and I will have a disagreement. So I want I want viewers to enjoy the fireworks here. I personally think that there's a lot of headroom above human intelligence. And I think that the universe we live in, it's pretty low entropy, right? Like at the end of the day, the laws of physics probably are pretty simple. Like they don't take that many bits to specify, is my impression. And I think that the AI pretty quickly will just figure it out. Like it'll just kind of be kind of like pressing up against the walls of like what there is to know about how to engineer things in our universe. And I do think it'll subjectively feel like a blueprint where you can just like decide where the atoms go. Like I feel like it will feel like it has a lot of mastery over how to configure this universe in a way that we humans, I would argue we're getting there if you extrapolate our trajectory. That actually just seems like the natural extrapolation, but we're like, I don't know, a century or two away. But the AI is going to get there very soon. And so I just brought up nanotech as an example, to test the waters with you of like, do you also think that that is what seems likely to happen?
Yeah, I think nanotech is, I mean, one of like it's this interesting example, right? Where if it's possible, then I mean, it's definitely super scary because like it's at that level that would outcompete anything that isn't nanotech, right? But then on the other hand, like for nanobots to really be nano, like their source code has to be, in the kilobytes and tens of kilobytes, and that does feel like a range within which it's possible for like evolution to really try a huge number of of different things, right? And of course, you could argue that there are like ideal solutions where something that's even one step away from the ideal solution doesn't get you anywhere, and so evolution just like never discovers it, right? Like if you think of algorithms from computer science, like fast Fourier transform, like a fast Fourier transform with one bit flips the wrong way is not something that's almost as good as fast Fourier transform. It's just random junk, right? So,
Right.
like basically, I think if you start going through different examples of like specific types of super technology, like I think you do have to just like get very empirical about each one.
Sure. So we could talk about like space travel and like Dyson swarms, right? Just like, oh, harvest all the energy of the star. That seems like the kind of thing where physics totally says it's possible, right? So it's just a matter of getting in the weeds and engineering. And it seems like we as humans, given enough decades, we're going to do it. I just think
Agreed.
that the AI can just kind of jump to the solution. That's my guess about how the AI is going to work. What the level of
Mhm.
intelligence will just make engineering seem so easy to it.
I agree. Okay, so with Dyson swarms in particular, I think AI will definitely create them eventually. I think the question is how much time it will take, right? Like, there's definitely fundamental constraints on the speed of rearranging atoms and its ability to expand out to a full industry that rearranges the atoms of that planet into something that could be a Dyson sphere. Like I think. From an AI safety perspective, like there, the relevant variable is basically like, is it something where it's able to just suddenly snap its fingers and take over, or is it something that would take time, right? Because if it's the former, then we're screwed. And if it's the latter, then like that's a process where there's a lot of potential places for like basically people aided by every other AI to participate and intervene in.
A common pushback when I bring up this line of reasoning is people are like, well, chaos, man, you can't really do that much with the universe beyond what humans can do because you stop being able to predict what's going to happen because there's chaos. Are you one of those people?
I mean, I think there's definitely things that ASI will not be able to do for chaos related reasons. Like my probability is that 90% chance that ASI will not be able to find pre-images for SHA-512. Like I
Sure,
think
yeah.
yeah, like hash functions. And also, similarly, like I expect that there will be bounds on how much long-term predicting ASI will be able to do. I think over 50% confidence for the three-body problem. I believe in the idea that there is such a thing as fundamentally chaotic systems, and it's, like, actually
Oh, sure, yeah.
quite easy to get to them even accidentally, and they're unpredictable. But, like, yeah, I definitely don't think that, like, that stuff is an argument for why, you can't have, Dyson spheres or why you can't make big tech advancements compared to today.
Right. I mean, it seems like the pattern is pretty well established with human engineering of like, yes, there's chaos. Yes, you can't predict anything. But like in practice, you make the airplane and only 1 in a million people die on it, right? Like the airplane
Mhm.
works, right? Even though Navier-Stokes or whatever is like really complicated, but like we still do it.
Yep, yeah, no, it's like there's definitely a lot of phenomena that are chaotic at the micro level, but then like actually follow reasonably understandable laws where sometimes you have to model one or two things by randomness at the macro level, and that just ends up being totally navigable.
All right, so it sounds like a lot of agreement here so far. Let's move on to talk about this concept of techno optimism. This is all the way back in 2023. Mark Andreessen published something about techno optimism, and then you responded to it with DAC, which we'll get to in a second. But before that, let me just ask you: are you a techno optimist?
I think yes. I think historically, yeah, speaking, technology has been probably the most powerful source of good in the world. And I think by default, there are a lot of just amazing things that we should be able to expect out of technology. Like I expect to the extent that politics doesn't interfere, technology will make food and housing ultra cheap. It will like cure all diseases. It will do a lot of things to potentially and like even help us become better people. Like there's all kind of and even like technologies have done all of these things, right? Like like, lots of diseases have been cured. Because of the internet, we're all able to be much more informed than we were before. Even like technology does sometimes create problems, but often a trends that I believe in is that when wave n of technology creates a problem, wave n plus one of a technology solves it, right? And like the best example of this for me is air pollution, where like air pollution was an incredibly big deal, right, in the 1950s, and like by our standards, cities like London and Los Angeles were like unlivable, right? But then
Mhm.
we basically decided like, hey, we want this problem solved, and we solved it, and now those cities are relatively speaking great, right?
And even before air pollution, you had like horses crapping all over the road, right?
Yep, exactly. So I believe in that, but I think one of the big kind of motivating charts for this is if you look at the chart of life expectancy over the past century, it just looks like an up and up, right? And like probably the biggest argument against the sort of unbridled techno optimism is like, oh well, what about unintended consequences? This stuff can be used for bad, but then like, what is the worst? Well, like the worst of the worst that can happen, right? And like the answer in the 20th century was World War II, right? And like World War
Sure.
II was incredibly bad, right? And like it made life expectancies drop by a lot that was visible on the charts, but at the same time, life expectancy was higher in Germany in 1955 than in 1935, right? And so, like, it's this insanely powerful force where, like, if it can even wash away things as bad as World War II, then, like, you got to give it some respect, right? But then, of course, there is this caveat that I think both of us agree in, which is basically that super intelligent AI is not like other technologies, right? And this is one of these kind of catches that we have to think about. Basically, are there discontinuities? And then the other thing is that I think like the pattern of technology making things better is not and the pattern of technology solving problems that's created by previous technology, like it's not automatic, right? It depends on human beings saying, like, wait, this wave of technology caused this problem. We have to go and fix it, right? And I think like we are human beings that are part of this system, and we have to be part of that process too, right? So I think those are the two big caveats on my techno optimism. Basically, one, ASI is different, and two, like the good things are not automatic, and we have to actually do things, and often even like do things that involve complicated stuff like government policies that like actually make the good things happen.
Great. Okay. Well said on all counts. I am also a techno optimist. Some people may not realize this, but I definitely am. I am also impressed by this crazy graph that is like exponential, showing like median human wealth. My favorite chapter of a book about techno optimism is The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley.
I've not read it. I've heard of it.
Chapter one was my favorite. The other chapters are more forgettable for me, but chapter one is so good because it's basically just like talking about how like the past was like so bad and the present is so much better. And I think it's spot on. And that is like very profound. You know, people, not enough people appreciate this basic fact. Clearly, you do. If you were to ask me, hey, why do we have nice things? I'd be like, well, obviously technology and then also capitalism, right? I don't know which one's like a bigger force, the technology part or the capitalism part. I feel like they're both needed.
Hmm. Technology is the biggest force, right? And I think improved quality of institutions, capitalism is definitely, yeah, a big one. And then I think like more inclusive and like large coalition political orders are definitely, yeah, like basically things like um, democracy. I think contributed quite a bit as well. And it's like the reduction in war contributed quite a bit as well. Improvements in our ability to cooperate now compared to something like 1,000 years ago.
Okay, so you're a techno optimist. Are you a transhumanist?
Let's see, how would I even define a transhumanism? I think probably you just have to define it through a kind of cluster definition, right? Like, do I want to have longevity technology to live 10,000 years or potentially longer? Yes. Would I want to eventually be uploaded? I mean, sure, once it's safe.
Hmm.
On the other hand, do I want to like force the entire world to go into those things? No. But at the same time, I think transhumanists themselves, like people who self-identify as transhumanism, generally easily say like, yeah, if someone doesn't wants to self-upload it, if someone just wants a regular human life, then they should absolutely have that right. So yeah, I think, yeah, I'm a transhumanist.
All right, same here. Okay, so you pointed out when we were talking about techno optimism that we have to put an asterisk because it seems like AI is not going to be that much like other tech. It seems to pose more danger. For instance, with other tech, like you pointed out, like, oh, we have cars and they're polluting. Oftentimes the answer is like, just plow forward, just iterate, it'll work itself out. More tech fixes everything. But in the specific case of AI, it seems like there may be some dynamics that break the historical pattern for us techno optimists, right? Maybe elaborate on that.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is independent agency, right? Like historically, yeah, technologies that we've invented, they're technologies that do a lot of things, but ultimately there has to be a human somewhere that presses something like a button to make the thing happen. And so power ultimately still stays in a human's hands, right? And like like even that it can be worrying in a lot of ways, right? Like outside of AI, I think one of my bigger worries of technology is like the concentration of power that some modern digital technology leads to, like the fact that it's even possible to create billions of devices that you sell to people, but then those devices ultimately still kind of phone home and you can see everything that people are doing. You have access to an off switch, like you can still, like you're essentially, yeah, you're not selling a product, you're selling sort of membership in your digital empire, and there's basically no limits to how that can scale. Like, there are things like this that worry me, right? But I think, like, the really big thing is, independent agency, and, the fact that, like, basically, yeah, ASI is, not a tool, it is a species, and it's a species that can outcompete humans.
Exactly. Now, there's another angle to look at this, which is the danger of the development process and the inability to redo, right? Because if you look at why is tech so great, right? Why is tech progress so worthwhile to invest in? Well, people work on tech and they iterate and they keep making it better. And like the first version is usually janky and then the second version is better and so on, right? But in the case of AI, you kind of have this positive feedback loop and there's like a big danger that there won't be a second version, correct?
Absolutely. I think like the agency is a big part of making that the case, right? Because if you look at extremely destructive technologies that don't have agency, which could be like super pandemics under the most pessimistic assumptions, it could be nuclear war under the most pessimistic assumptions, like these kinds of things they're gonna kill a lot of people, but they're not gonna kill 100% of the population, right? Like, at the very least, you have, like Antarctic bases, you have submarines, you have individual places in far corners of the world, and they're going to survive it. And the thing that killed most people, it's not a smart thing. It's not going to like go and take active steps that where it says, my objective function is to kill people. Let me go and find people and make sure I haven't missed them, right? It's just like a very dumb thing that executes one strategy. It succeeds where it succeeds, it fails where it fails, and then it's done, right? But ASI, like, no, like, it is goal-directed, and, it is going to, like, hunt those, stray submarines at Antarctic bases down and kill them. So, like, that is the danger.
Well, if you go back a little, do a little history of tech discourse in 2023, 2024, there was this weird dichotomy where the effective altruism movement got mixed up with this idea of tech deceleration, like as if it's synonymous when it's like two very different ideas. And then as a reaction to that, some people went off and invented this idea that tech acceleration is like the opposite of effective altruism, and they called it effective acceleration. And they said that we should kind of like throw caution to the wind and like double down on tech acceleration. And they didn't seem sensitive to the idea that maybe AI is fundamentally different, right?
Yeah, and I think, one of the kind of meta things to keep in mind with today's ideologies is, that, like, honestly, the level of quality has, gone down, right? Like,
Yeah.
and this is true at every level, like, if you even look at, the like manifestos of crazy people, right? Like Ted
Yeah.
Kaczynski, like yeah, he killed people, but like his manifesto on the future of industrial civilization, like it has cogent arguments, and they're very wrong arguments, but they're like intellectual arguments that you can go grapple with, right? But then if you look at people of his category today, it's like just vibes, and it's like
They really phone in those manifestos.
or if you look at, like Bronze Age mindsets, like if you read that, like it's all just vibes, right?
The political
Uh,
party platforms are also like nothing now.
yeah, there's no kind of deep vision of, like this is a set of core fundamental principles that I believe in. These are the goals that I have. Like these are things that needs to be different in order to try to achieve this goal. Let's just like it is extremely vibes based. It's extremely just kind of rapidly make a thing that like achieves a particular aesthetic. Like it's definitely like less even agent like than before, right? And like honestly, like EAC is that, right? Like EAC, it does not have intellectual, like deeply thought through arguments for why, things like AI safety are wrong. It's just like, hey, like deceleration is darkness and this is light. And like that's basically, as far as it goes. But at the same time, like vibes do speak to people, right? And there are a lot of people who, really, feel that, tech deceleration has gone too far. And I mean, this also gets tied into the whole discourse about, wokeness having gone too far. And like the
Right.
thing with vibes is like they're so fundamentally about kind of wanting to entangle with everything. And like the exact opposite of decoupling, right? And like there's a lot of points of view from which effective accelerationism sounds totally correct. Like, no, like Europe should have more air conditioning, right? And like, degrowth is very wrong and ruinous and counterproductive. And like I think we should be much braver on on many forms of biotech. And I think the people that wants to ban synthetic meat are batshit insane, right? There's lots and lots of tech questions where the acceleration side is totally correct, and two, where there are a lot of people that kind of sincerely are pushing for the deceleration side, and often it just is because of this kind of very abstract and vibes based fear of change, right? And so they want to like. And so people are attracted to, the vibe that takes the opposite side, right? But at the same time, like the thing with kind of vibes as these sort of collective, like super agents, is that they are less agent-like. They have a much lower IQ. And then like they're not able to handle the nuance that, like, well, actually, like AI needs to be handled carefully.
So you stepped into the void late 2023. You noticed that the conversation was getting bogged down. It wasn't productive. So you basically pulled a Scott Adams high ground maneuver. You know what I'm talking about? You basically came in and said something that nobody can really disagree with. The idea that ideologies aside, we all have a lot in common, hoping AI goes well. We don't want to miss out on Pareto improvements, right? There's like a lot of low hanging fruit of stuff we can do. And so thus enters D/AC, which means it's your coinage and it means defensive, decentralized, democratic differential acceleration, correct?
Correct. And I think, and I've thought about this, that I think if you had to narrow it down to three, I would say it's defensive decentralized acceleration.
Hmm.
Actually, yeah, Jason Crawford from Progress Studies movement. He was at the DIAC event in SF, and he had this interesting kind of analogy where he basically talked about DIAC as being something that integrates the strengths of three different eras, right? Where like the late 19th century was the era of being decentralized and being accelerationist, but it did not have defense. And so we had lots of market failures. We had lots of things like air pollution. We had in a lot of these like negative outcomes that people disliked. Then the early 20th century is, the era of peak statism in often the worst possible ways, right? It was the era of dominance of national security states. And basically, yeah, that was the era of being defensive and accelerationist, but without being decentralized. And of course, that led to all kinds of extremely horrible things of its own, culminating in World War II. And then the second half of the 20th century is, like basically the hipster era, and hipsters are decentralized and they are democratic, but they don't like acceleration. Like I grew up in Canada, and I think in Canada, like when I was in high school, there was this kind of dominant vibe where basically, yeah, it's like the ideal world is exactly like the world as it exists today, but with less greed and more public healthcare. And
Yeah.
like that's well, like the kind of sentiment that's common in I think definitely Europe. I think definitely many places in the U.S. Though the
Right.
developing world really, like that doesn't feel it at all, right? And like this is the thing we have to move past. And the question is like, can we get the benefits of all three of those things?
Right.
Mm.
Remind me, if you said you had to pick two words that start with D. So what do you
Yeah,
pick?
it was defensive and decentralized.
All right. So for short, it's just defensive, decentralized acceleration. All right. And it's a middle ground between pausing and accelerating, right? It's a high ground maneuver. Now, you've pointed out that defense and decentralization are closely related, your top two, because your ideal vision, if I understand correctly, your ideal vision for DAC is that you're enabling an equilibrium of many self-sovereign parties.
Correct. Yeah, and like the motivating analogy I had there is if you compare the political environment of Switzerland to the political environment of like the Eurasian steppes, right? Like Switzerland is amazingly able to protect its independence. It has a super decentralized structure internally. It's famously the country where nobody knows who the hell the president is. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not probably not even going to be able to tell you if it's supposed to be a president or a prime minister, and I'm sure many people in Switzerland probably won't either, right? But at the same time, like it works and it's quite effective, right? And one of the things that enabled Switzerland surviving is the fact that the country is surrounded by a whole bunch of friggin' high mountains, right?
Mhm.
In World War II, like even the Nazis ended up like not even trying to invade it, right? But then on the other side, the Eurasian steppes are like the most offense favoring grounds possible, right? It's just like flat land, and you could just have like people on
Yeah.
soldiers or tanks or whatever, just like plow through it. And if you're the attacker, arguably you have the advantage because you can pick the place and time, right? And those are the places of where tens of millions of people die in, like great wars over the course of many centuries in history, right? And so the question is sort of how do we make the world metaphorically, kind of structurally more like Switzerland and less like the Eurasian steppes? And I would argue that's good for safety and it's good for democracy and good for freedom.
Right. So it's definitely a nice ideal because the future going wrong, it does kind of look like a bunch of destruction reigns over a lot of different people who would have liked to, have protection of some sort, but they didn't because they were too easy to reach by like the nuclear blast or the AI or something, right? So you're basically saying, how do we somehow decentralize the world into defended regions like Switzerland?
Right, exactly. And I think both kind of physically and also metaphorically, right? Like if you talk about, like things like cyber defense and even bio defense, those are things where like you can't quite think of it as a region by region thing, but like it is, it is something where like following principles of locality can be a very good thing, right? But locality can be physical locality and digital locality, and like we should be mindful of both.
hmm So my current analysis of DIAC is that, so first of all, I respect the high ground maneuver, right? No, I don't think anybody can disagree with that. This is like a nice ideal, right? I like the ideal. I just think that it's probably going to be impractical. Like, I don't actually expect us to successfully do DIAC. But before I hit you with my objections, let's look at the upside. So, in the last like 18 months since you published the first DIAC post, what is your favorite example of recent research in the DIAC direction, or like recent DIAC engineering success stories? Like, what's going well with DIAC?
Hmm. Um, so, I mean, first of all, I think basically everything that Bulvi is funding is squarely within the bio side of the DAC space, right? So, for example, one of the companies that Bulvi is funding is doing COVID and other kinds of disease testing in a way that is airborne. So basically, imagine like version one of this is you imagine a device where you just breathe into it and it just tells you after a minute with PCR quality, like, do you have any one of these diseases or not? And then version two is like a box that just sits passively on a table. And then, like, after a few minutes, if anyone has a disease, it beeps, right? The reason why this is valuable is that if you look at why China was able to fight against COVID so effectively, a big part of it was like basically like PCR testing everyone every 48 to 72 hours was de facto mandatory, right? And so they were able to catch lots of cases very early. And then even if outbreaks started, they were able to stop them in a lot of cases, right? And, like, there's definitely a lot of, darker sides to that whole story, right? And, the Shanghai, lockdowns that lasted for months, like, basically left people in their apartments, stuck for were extremely traumatizing to, a lot of people, right? But, like, a lot of things, and especially the side of like rapid testing, like it was very effective, and China was able to hold out all the way until the Omicron era, right? And so if you imagine that kind of technology, but without requiring human beings to do anything, like you just make
Sure.
that quality of testing just like a basic part of anyone's ambient environment, like that's the kind of technology that Valve's funding. And a lot of like that particular company, it's like actually making some pretty significant amounts of progress. So like I'm
Got it.
personally
Got it. Got
looking
it.
forward to them coming out with something good in the next 1 to 2 years, right? So that that's the sort of thing that you would think about on the like bio defense kind of DX side. Like, there's also other planks, and I think there's also a lot of people doing DAC related, like, things without calling themselves part of DAC, and, I
hmm
think there's a lot of bright stuff in, even computer security, but, I mean, we can get into any of
hmm
those rabbit holes.
Gotcha. So, I mean, I acknowledge that some technologies are really nice and they're like pretty clearly not good. I mean, you never know what creative use somebody comes up with, but like, well, on inspection, something where it's like, hey, it just tests everybody ambiently and tells them what's wrong, like what you're talking about. That sounds really good, right? That sounds asymmetrically, as you say, toward defense. And similarly, I think a classic example is like public key encryption, right? That
I am
seems like a defense promoting, yeah, like more, there could be more decentralized islands that have this power now. It seems helpful. So I agree that we can find some examples that seem like DAC wins. So my objection is just that when you look at like the most powerful tools, they're just not going to have this asymmetrical defense favoring flavor. They're just going to be really powerful general tools, like vision. Can you really say a vision is more defensive or offensive, for example?
Yeah, no, it could easily go both ways.
Okay. Right. And the tool in question is super intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, vision's an interesting example, right? Because the rise of modern surveillance is like one of these like really big topics, and it's generally, like I think believed to be something that's very worrying in a lot of ways, right? So yeah, like it's there's a huge amount of technologies that have very ambiguous consequences, and I fully agree with that. Whether offense wins or whether defense wins, to me, is something that's not binary. To me, it's a slider, and like different technologies push that slider in all kinds of directions. Sometimes they increase capability without really affecting the slider. And but then to me, like every marginal unit of movement toward the defensive side is like a really valuable and good thing.
Okay, well, when we're talking about super intelligence, though, like
Mm.
maybe do you have
Um,
any specific thoughts on what it looks like to build super intelligence in a way that's DAC?
mm. Yeah, I think the biggest question there is like, I mean, what type of super intelligence, and like what is the context in which like it gets released into the world, right? So like a very kind of not D version of superintelligence is like if you have this one very powerful dominating thing that's like very far ahead of everyone, and so like basically no one else is like even able to put up any kind of resistance against it, and like essentially it just is able to take over the whole world, right? And if we do that, then effectively there is this like we have one shot, and either it's aligned with us, in which case it creates utopia and it's a benevolent dictator, or it ends up being unaligned, in which case, we're all screwed, right? I think, I mean, realistically, the D version of super intelligence is something more pluralistic, where like basically, yeah, intelligence improves over time in a way that like many different people around the world have access to it, and essentially we're able to continue maintaining a world with kind of roughly, yeah, at least a similar type of structure to what we have today, where there's multiple actors, there isn't something with like any one clear level of dominance, and like effectively any gains that one makes end up being transparent enough that they get adopted by others, and like that's the decentralized kind of version, and
Yeah.
then the question
What
is
if I
like,
say this? What if we say that like policies that try to target a world where AI superintelligence is decentralized and grows like slowly and manageably in capabilities, like that would be like a DAC approach?
I'd say so. Policies can have all kinds of different consequences, right? Because I mean, I'm actually even in favor of some AI decelerationist policies. Like, I think that having some of these, like international compute treaties that do things like, creating globally controllable off switches, like that seems like a sensible, like tool to have in the toolbox, if it can be done in a way where, like, if the button is pressed, it kind of evenly slows down everyone, as opposed to, like, basically, yeah, like, being a tool where, like, it's basically a tool for control by one party, because if that's what it is, that just creates maximum incentives for everyone else to resist it. So, like, I'm in favor of, like, some decel things, as well. I think,
Yep.
deac things, in, the sense of, I don't think I'm in favor of any policy that tries to accelerate AI. I think I'm in favor of policies that ensure that AI developments that are that are distributed more. I think I would agree. And then, of course, there's the caveat that, like, if we talk about those things, we haven't really talked about the defensive side yet. And I think there's interesting things that you can do there, like. The concept of just having hardware that's able to make credible claims about what kind of code is running on it. Like, this is one of those famous things that Eliezer talks a lot about, how like you can have more cooperation if like agents are able to prove things about what their source code is, right? And so I think having more things like that is valuable, and I think it's also very valuable in a kind of sub super intelligent cases, where if we, for biosafety reasons, we end up having lots of sensors to do early detection, like it would be very nice to have like stronger assurances that these sensors are not kind of simultaneously spying on everyone, and are not able to just like push data about everyone's private lives into some kind of global panopticon, right? So I
Right,
think
right,
like
right.
that's also a really valuable direction.
I want to just pause on the fact that you are saying that you acknowledge, the value of these kind of decelerationist, global coordination policies, because I think we're both on the same page that it's like, we don't like this, right? Like, this doesn't make us happy that to like propose this kind of stuff, right? It's like we both like building tech as fast as possible.
Absolutely. There are a lot of approaches to the to the decelerationist thing that like strike me as being much worse than others, right? And I think the version of this stuff that is the worst is the version that slows things down by de facto putting a very concentrated authority in charge of what can happen and what can't, because if you have an organization that controls that lever, then effectively that's an organization that controls the world. And to me, that's both a bad outcome just from the perspective of my preferences and values of what kind of political structure I wants to have, and I think it's also something that will contribute to derailing the entire project from succeeding, right? And so, like, if we can find deceleration things that, actually credibly, decelerate everyone, including militaries, then, that's the kind of pause button I'm much more on board with than a pause button where people can exempt themselves by proving to political power brokers that they're important enough.
What do you think of MIRI's proposal, where it's not like there's one actor controlling all the AIs, but it's more like a shared international space, right? Huge international data center space where every country can come on and work together, but it's just all being monitored. Everybody can monitor everybody. And that way, if things go crazy, they can all contribute to, whatever, vote on pressing the off button, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think things like this are interesting. I mean, obviously, yeah, I have a strong prior that things of that type that are created by the kinds of people that have built present day technologies will basically end up looking like a very big trust me system that just that does end up super concentrating authority. But basically, my willingness to be warm to that kind of thing is in proportion to the extent to which it's not like that, right? So, if see the if you have a data center where literally, I as a private individual would be able to mail in my camera, and the camera would actually be pointed at the hardware, and I would be able to see it running, things like that, things like that would improve my confidence in the thing, right?
Yeah, so to recap here, you're showing a lot of nuance. Like, for you, it's no problem. But I think for most people in the discourse, it is difficult. So just to recap here, the nuance,
Yeah.
DAC isn't as simple as just saying rah rah decentralization, rah rah libertarianism. There's kind of a paradox here. Accelerationists and libertarians, they think of themselves as like pro tech for everybody, pro freedom, pro decentralization. But if you do that, you've pointed out before, the natural equilibrium of AI isn't just that everybody can have their own AI and everybody plays together nicely. The natural equilibrium very likely is that somebody's AI just starts getting ahead, right? And like seizing more resources. And then you've broken the decentralized model, even though you let everybody be decentralized and free, but then you break the model if and when one AI takes the lead.
Right, exactly. I think one of the big kind of both non-existential and leading to existential risks that I'm worried about is basically this historical trends that we've had where the agents that make up humanity, if they make progress, that progress diffuses by default, and there isn't really a way to opt out of diffusion. Um, like that trend breaking is one of the things that worries me, right? And so, I looked at the AI 2027 story, for example, and one of the conclusions that I came away with is basically that the extent to which I'm worried and the extent to which that feels risky is proportional to the extent to which Agent 5 actually is very far ahead of everyone else, right? Basically, yeah, this is actually one of those reasons where the anti-open source direction that's popular among some AI safety people actually really worries me, right? And
Hmm.
like basically, yeah, like the conclusion there is, well, actually, yeah, if your ability to be defended from one AI goes crazy is like based on actually having other AIs that are powerful enough that like they can do something about it, and that they're able to absorb like any new gains in in capability as growth, then like you want policy that pushes the level of diffusion up, right? And so, like basically, yeah, silos bad, Chinese spies good. That's an important one. Open source good. Like basically, yeah, capability is being like accessible to more groups of people. Good. Um,
Hmm.
so that's like one of the ways in which I would kind of depart from like some of the standard ideas. And so I think actually this is one of the reasons why, yeah, like the hardware side is the place where like really, yeah, believe in the, like where I believe it's most practical and like to concentrate the regulation, right? Because that's like fully, yeah, compatible with diffusion of ideas. If the thing that you're doing is you're ensuring that like execution of them, especially at the largest scales, is something that we have some control over.
Uh-huh. Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, and also from reading your other stuff, your mainline non-doom scenario of how AI progress can go well is if there's no really fast boom that overwhelms everybody, right? As
Right.
you said, there's diffusion, there's open source, so you're basically pro open source, and we're just really hoping for things to just progress at a reasonable pace that we can handle and not get overwhelmed, right? I feel like that's your mainline non-doom scenario.
Right, basically where the world becomes kind of like continues to be reasonably, yeah, pluralistic in terms of like centers of power and agency, and like and that keeps going as a stable pattern, basically, yeah, all the way up until we reach the technological ceiling.
Right. Now, what about Foom though? Because from my perspective, I actually think that Foom at some point is very likely.
Yeah, and I think like scenarios that are more foomy are definitely, yeah, scenarios where this kind of thing becomes more like less likely to happen. I think at some point, like basically, if we want, human beings to be part of the story, then at some point, like this is one of the reasons why I believe in things like brain-computer interfaces, and then eventually things like uploading. Is
Hmm.
that like that's a way in which we can continue to be a leading part of the story, and like like we can actually, yeah, continue to have agency in the world even as the time scales even shrink. But I mean, it's definitely, yeah, one of the like like it's definitely a far from guaranteed scenario.
Yeah, I did see that in your posts. So basically, you think that it would be ideal to merge with AIs, correct?
Correct.
But people have pointed out that that may not be plausible. I think Rob Wiblin in your podcast was saying that isn't that like saying that maybe birds can merge with airplanes? But it's like, what does that mean for a bird to be merged with an airplane? Isn't it really just the airplane?
Right. I think yeah, it's an interesting analogy. It's like, what if, birds had much more agency back in, the year like 1500, and then they realized that, like, hey, yeah, humans are gonna want to have these things at some point, and so, and then they somehow had agency over the process of evolution, and they, yeah, basically decided, like, hey, yeah, like, let's actually turn ourselves into air horses, and then let's actually figure out how to give ourselves jet engines, and then we can actually be competitive. And then, I mean, if that succeeded, then we would have a world where birds have quite a bit of agency today.
Yeah, but in that hypothetical, it feels to me like we just figured out how to build an adequate plane, and the part where we stuck the bird on, I don't know. It's kind of hard to make the analogy. I mean, if we okay, forget the analogy, right? If we're just talking about human brains and AIs,
Mhm.
it's like I just don't know what the human is doing like in real time, right? It's because it seems like because the AI is so much more powerful, so it's like is the human just evaluating? Like, what does that mean to merge? I'm already my neurons are already like so much weaker than the AI that why not just say I'm not merged? I'm just sitting here with my terminal and the AI is asking me questions. Isn't that as good as merging?
I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, especially at early to mid stages, like that is the type of interaction that we're going to see, right? I think like the long term kind of technological ceiling future of this like does involve uploading, right? And like I think it does involve like actual human minds moving to digital substrate. At which point, like we'll actually be able to think at like hopefully, yeah, like the levels that will let us grapple with the kinds of ideas that are at the technological ceiling, right? And like I think some people will make that choice and some people won't, right? But like, if we're talking about the far future, then, like, to me, basically, yeah, there's, like, 2 options where 1 is spooky and 2 is total disempowerment, right? And, that, like, basically just because, there is going to be someone who's, thinking at many times human speed, and, well, I'm sure we'll get there, but also it is something that, I'll have to go through quite a bit of iterations in order to get to.
You recently spearheaded a big and successful merge of the proof of stake chain into Ethereum. Is it possible that you're getting too cocky about merging?
I mean, possible, right? But also, like I think there are kind of good scenarios that don't flow through the kind of path that I described. Like there is the scenario where like we get an aligned ASI, and then eventually the ASI decides like, hey, like human beings value agency, and so like let me figure out how to give human beings some more agency in this world at the technological ceiling that like I've figured out how to go through the more dangerous stages and get everyone to, right? So like I guess maybe we can like one of the things to unpack here, right, is to what extent some of the sort of like spookier things about these kinds of scenarios are specifically, yeah, properties of the DIAC world, and which of them are properties of any sufficiently technologically advanced world in general, right? Because like to me, there's basically, yeah, like as I've said, right, there's 2 options, right? One of them is that something very spooky, yeah, happens to humans, which like ourselves getting uploaded is one of those examples, and the other option is total disempowerment. And then there's of course a third option, which is permapause, right? But I mean, to me,
Yeah.
permapause just like becomes more and more unstable over time, and I think that like that ends up being politically spooky in a lot of ways that most people in the world would end up really disliking, right? And so like there is a, yeah, fundamental question of like once you get into the really far technological future, which of those 3 bullets do you bite? And there's definitely a lot of people whom I respect who basically bite the bullet of human disempowerment and basically say like, well, it's okay, we'll have a world where essentially we're retired and the AIs are thinking a millions of times faster than us and they're doing all of the important stuff. And like life basically just becomes a game for us. And like I respect the kind of thinking that leads to that kind of answer, but also, like I feel like there's a fundamental human drive for not just enjoying the world, but like actually being a, yeah, productive part of contributing to it. And so if you take that to the logical conclusion, then I think like the second one of those 2 just becomes the most palatable, or the second one of those 3 becomes the most palatable option.
Which was the second again?
Right. So option 1 is humans retire and become cows grazing on the fields, and AIs that are a million times faster do the important stuff. Option 2 is basically humans upload and like we turn into something which like feels to our minds like a, yeah, continuous kind of psychological experience of like being one mind all the way from where we are now to something that can think at levels that are at the technological ceiling. But yeah, but still, the end stage of that feels like as radically different compared to where we are now as where you are now felt to where you were when you were like 2 years old. And then the third option is permapause.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the second option seems like the ideal, like Eliezer's fun theory sequence, right?
I mean, I think there's like a version of the fun theory sequence where, like, basically we are kind of cows grazing on the fields, and like we, yeah, like we're basically put inside of games, and those games give us kind of the feeling of things like progression and meaning and doing valuable things. But at the same time, AIs can totally run circles around us. But I think, yeah, like ultimately, the second one is, I mean, probably still like somewhat like more compatible if it can happen.
Mhm. Now that we're talking about the good outcome, I think you've made this observation that the AI companies aren't really being clear about what they're imagining as the good outcome, right? Like
Hmm.
Sam Altman is talking about things changing surprisingly little. That's his recent line, like things are going to change so much, but you're going to be surprised how little they're changing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think okay, like the AI companies, they're everything that they do and say at this point is very heavily guided by all kinds of political incentives, right? And like there was a period where I think they were guided by these very idealistic causes, and maybe to some extent they still pretends to be, but like that basically died sometime between 2023 and now. Regardless of what you actually believe, it's definitely better to say for marketing that you are bringing into the world a future that is fundamentally very relatable and recognizable, where the only thing that's different is that we have tools that are better that do unpleasant stuff for us. Um, and then also, that's kind of the story that's like optimized for the general public and the media. And then, of course, like this is the thing that really worries me, right? The story that's optimized for the government is basically, yeah, we're going to make your military great.
Yep.
Yeah, like military, yeah, use of this stuff, like like that really worries me, right? Like that's something where and it is something where there's been this, like, very rapid cultural shift where, like, a few years ago, everyone was adamant that, what they were building tools for peace and not for war, and, I
Yeah.
think Anthropic, like, had explicit covenants to that regard. I forget, I think maybe OpenAI did too, but then, like, they've all just, explicitly dropped them, and, like, they've, basically, yeah, all, embraced, being parts of, the national security state of which country that they're in. And the use of these things as weapons is something that is increasingly a part of the world already, and it'll go further.
When you mentioned the military, I was going to ask, do you think that your mainline doom scenario has to do with the military building AI?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's definitely a large part of my probability mass. Um, Like, basically, 'cause, I mean, if we get into, like, a serious, war, right, then, the thing that that just continues to be the trend in, serious wars is basically that often people come in with kind of high-minded norms about, yes, we're in a war, but even still, there are fundamental principles that, we're not going to, violate, right? And so, in World War One, in, like, the UK, one of those was not doing conscription because, we value freedom. Then in World War II, at the beginning, there wasn't that much of this like full on bombing of cities at the beginning. But then as war progresses and as people get more and more desperate, like basically the ladder just keeps on ratcheting up. And
Right.
yeah, like anything that gets done to like at the beginning to say, well, okay, there is a war, but we're not going to use this to rush to ASI. Like eventually, once it gets into year 4, year 5, more and more people just say, like, screw it. We're going to do things that get closer and closer to rushing to ASI, and like with less and less safety measures. And like you have to do it because the other guy's doing it, and then you get doom.
Okay, I think I'm putting my finger on the crux of disagreement between me and you because there's a reason why my PDUM is 50% and yours is 12%. I think yours is too low, and I think this is why. This goes back to a comment you made in your response to AI 2027. You were saying making the world less vulnerable is possible. So like, you seem optimistic about like laying down protections basically so that the AI won't boom too fast and run over them. So for example, you said you're optimistic that the end game of cybersecurity will actually be that we have well-defended systems. Like, is that the kind of thing that gives you confidence that PDOOM is significantly under 50%?
It's one of the things, right? I think, like, I also just have very big probability mass for just total unknown unknowns, like important variables come out that none of us have been thinking about. But maybe just to kind of lay out that side of the scenario, right? Basically, the thing that I argue is that in the AI 2027 scenario, like they argue that AI is going to get to this like super intelligent, crazy level, but by 2029, we're going to have things like cure for cancer, cure for aging, nanotech, early Dyson swarms, automated robot economy. And the thing that I notice is basically that they're giving all of these technologies to the attacker, but they're giving none of them to the rest of humanity to try to use in defense, right? And then in that story, we get wiped out by a pandemic, but like we actually know like pandemics are pretty dumb agents. And like we are currently orders of magnitude away from the optimum in terms of defending against pandemics, right? Like even sort of
Hmm.
normie technologies of the type that Balvi has funded, like my estimate is that if those get adopted, then like we're able to get a 10 to 20x reduction in airborne spread, right? And if you get the upper end of that range, then like basically even measles becomes unviable as a disease, right?
Well, I mean, with AI 2027, and I'm not as concerned as defending their scenario,
Right.
right? It's more like I think the larger crux between me and you is that, yeah, sure, okay, we can defend against this particular pandemic vector or whatever, right? But I still just think that we're going to be in like a plant situation, like we're just not going to be reacting on the time scale with the intelligence level that the AI is going to be presenting us with.
Mhm. Yeah. So okay. So I do think that like there will come a time when like these new waves of technology are happening like really fast, right? And like right now, these things are happening on the order of like years to decades, and then at some point that scale is going to be months, and then it's going to be weeks, and then it's going to be days. I don't think that rules out any of my scenarios, right? Because like effectively as AI creates new scenarios that we have to worry about, then like humans plus AI responding to scenarios, like the rate at which that's going to happen is also going to continue to increase, right? And so like I do think that we as humans aided by powerful technologies can be quite effective if we really have to be. And like this is a world that is going to be chaotic, right? And I definitely do not expect that we will come out clean, but I also like do not expect that it'll be clean for the attacker either, right?
Do you imagine that we're even going to stay in the loop of these kind of decision processes? Like, you don't think AIs will just be operating independently pretty soon? Assuming sufficient intelligence.
Right. Well, this gets back to the kind of the topic that we had about like an hour and a half ago, right, where we're talking about AGI and ASI, right? It's like the same question as what are our timelines, right? And if you were saying that AI operating independently on timelines that are too fast for human beings to make an impact, like that's basically saying like like ASI, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think it's very likely ASI is going to come in like the next couple decades.
Right. So then, yeah, and I think like my kind of story definitely becomes less likely in the worlds where where ASI comes sooner, and more likely in the worlds where we basically have more iterations of all of this happening in the pre-ASI regime, and potentially we can get close to the technological ceiling in a pre-ASI regime. But I think in the world where timelines are shorter, then I would argue that, like, basically, yeah, the thing that we need is some kind of pause. And like, what the thing that we want to do is figure out how to get that kind of pause in a way that is as like not power concentrating and as viable as possible. And but then if we succeed at that, then what we've done is we've basically brought ourselves into the world where ASI timelines are longer again. And then the question is, well, okay, we're delaying, but then what is the thing that we're delaying for, right? And then I
Right.
would argue that like the thing that's valuable to do is basically do DX style things anyway.
Okay, well, I definitely see the appeal of your mainline non-doom scenario, right? It's like, so we get the pleasure of watching AI get smarter and cooler and solve all these problems for us and like keep it on the edge where it hasn't overrun us or gone independently and taken away all our power to intervene in these kind of loops. Like, I definitely feel you that like I would love to live through the scenario where we somehow hang on and don't die and stay in the loop. It just feels like wishful thinking to allow myself to think that that's going to be the case.
Mhm. Yeah, no, like I acknowledge that there's some probability that you're totally right.
Okay, well, there's this question that I call the intractability question,
Mm.
which is, we need to come to grips with looking at the difficulty of super intelligent AI alignment on like a 20-year time frame and be like, you know what? This may be an intractable problem. I feel like this rarely gets discussed.
It's very possible that super intelligent AI alignment is intractable. I think if that ends up being true, then I would still feel more confident in an ecosystem where there isn't one agent dominating everything, but there is some collection of different agents that are kind of aligned based on hopefully various different methodologies centered around various different groups of people. Like that still feels like safer to me, even if it ends up being the case that all of these super intelligences are acting on time scales where like we as humans are just like watching things whizzing past us and we can't contribute.
So my threat model here, which is, Eliezer's and MIRI's, is the if anyone builds it, everyone dies, right? Like
Right.
we're like playing shuffleboard. We're getting closer and closer to the edge where we get 0 points. And all I can think to do is like just not get closer to the edge. I don't think we have a plan for the edge at all. Like I feel like what you just described is you're trying to describe a plan for the edge, and I'm like, I think we should just back away from the edge.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I would argue that, like, the way I think about this is that, like, if you had to criticize, like any of the plan for the edge ideas, whether it's mine or whether it's the EX or whether it's anyone's, is that they're kind of like technologically naive. But I would argue that the back away from the edge approach is kind of politically naive in the sense that, like, we're basically talking about an N party prisoner's dilemma and, like, very deep levels of political cooperation in the context of a reality where the dominant theme of 2025 seems to be that like more and more crazy dictators have discovered that you can just bomb people, and then they're starting to just bomb people, right?
It sounds like we both agree that the nature of the problem is that we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? And the only difference is that you're saying like, well, obviously we can't go to the rock, and I'm like, well, obviously we can't go to the hard place, right? We both just see something as impossible, but it's like, well, we just have to talk about which one's less impossible.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Right. And I think, there is a value in kind of trying to do the right kind of, the right kind of both. I think, like, the thing that I think we should try to avoid is doing the wrong kind of both. Right. So,
Yeah.
on the technology side, like things that I'm against are basically, I mean, making capabilities progress happen even faster. Like I would be against that even if the even faster capabilities progress is fully open source.
But if you're against making it happen faster, doesn't that imply that you likely just want it to happen slower?
I do, yeah.
Okay. All right. Same here. Same here.
Yeah. And then on the political side, I think like the thing that would wants to really avoid is these visions of safety that are predicated on some kind of centralized approach that basically involves the good guys winning the game first. One of the things that really worried me is like the whole like like Leopold Aschenbrenner kind of situational awareness approach, where it basically says like, look, if we wants to be safe, then we have to win the game, and then like basically accelerate so like faster than everyone else, and then like basically present like China with an argument that like, look, we already won, and now you have to sign on to this. Where all computers is governed by us, and like we get to choose what all the limits are. And it's like, well, okay, so you're basically saying that you want China to sign on to a protocol that limits how many boxes they can run. Like, what do we know about how willing they are to do that, right? And like I think these kinds of like safety by like one small group winning kind of approaches, safety by saying, like we're going to self-select as the elite that is going to shepherd humanity through the transition safely, and like we're going to win, and then you should trust us. Like that sort of thing to me is like possibly as dangerous as the like
Right.
naive unbridled acceleration. I mean, in large part because like basically it's like the first step in the plan is acceleration, and then step 2 and step 3 are safety. So if we figure out ways to make AI progress happen, like at least less likely to happen crazy quickly, and at the same time, like make sure that diffusion continues to happen, and like at the same time, kind of make sure like do all we can to keep the world more cooperative. Then, and at the same time, do more to keep the world more well defended against kind of near term and midterm threats that are going to come up. Then, like that's the best path to improving things.
So getting back to the intractability thing though, right? So from my perspective, if we were a sane civilization, we would have a way to step back and evaluate how tractable or intractable the problem seems. This first occurred to me in 2023 when I was just on Twitter and I saw Jan Leike, who was leading safety at OpenAI at the time before he kind of resigned in disgust like a year later, but he was leading safety at OpenAI. And I remember he tweeted something that was just like optimistic and positive, like, oh, we're making some good progress on the safety team. I'm optimistic, it's a hard problem, but we'll eventually solve it. And my reaction to that was like, well, wait a minute, whose job is it to point out that the problem is intractable? If it was intractable, right? I'm not even saying it is, but if it was, whose job would it be to point out, hey, this is an intractable problem? Because it seems like the guy who's in that seat is just assuming that he needs to plow forward and do his best. He's not stepping back and meta evaluating whether to sound the alarm.
Yeah, and like also they don't have incentives to, right? Like, these are corporations where the basically the in some ways the entire investment pitch is involves the probability that these companies will dominate a big part of the world economy as a result of the AGI and ASI boom, right? And in eras past, you would have strong publicly funded academia that has also unaligned incentives, but at least a different vector of unaligned incentives. And ideally, it would be independent from both the tech world and the military world, and it would be able to say and make these arguments. But like right now, that's not super strong. And then also, OpenAI, of course, at the beginning had this idealistic vision that it would have this nonprofit governance, and then it would have this like very strong alignment team internally. But then, as we saw, like basically the company ended up giving up openness for safety, and then giving up safety for winning the race.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of OpenAI, I wanted to ask you about this situation, on the topic of policy and on the topic of whose job is it to say that it's intractable. So remember, during the OpenAI board coup, Helen Toner observed, there was that famous drama where she observed ensuring AGI benefits humanity, OpenAI's charter, that might be consistent with OpenAI collapsing rather than keeping Sam as CEO, right? So she was kind of in that seat of being like, hey, this isn't going to work out. We shouldn't just go do our best. We should potentially, shut it down.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a common pattern, right? That like I forget like where this was from, but the standard joke is like, I want to save the world and I want to be the one doing it, right? Like
Right.
people and organizations and entities of all kinds, whether for profit or nonprofit or government or charity or whatever, they often are very averse to the idea that the best way to accomplish their mission or goal might just be to stop working on what they're working on and dissolve.
I want to ask you about Anthropic and Dario Amodei. Anthropic, there's obviously a lot to like. I mean, the team is obviously rock stars, lots of great people, and I know that they're conflicted. I know that, like, when I personally, with a handful of people from Pause AI, when we protested outside their office, I know that they felt pangs of guilt.
Anthropic AI! Reckless! Dario Amodei!
Like, they took the protest seriously, and like, they're good people, so I can empathize with where they're coming from, even though my position is that they should just quit. Anthropic, in one sense, is like the best actor among the AI companies because they truly feel that safety is important, and PDOOM is like, I don't know, more than in the sane zone, more than 10%. Now, having said all of those good things about Anthropic, there's also an argument that they're actually doing the most damage because, from my perspective, they are tractability-washing the problem. Like, remember, I'm saying like it's so important to say this might be intractable, but when Anthropic is saying, yeah, there's like, there's a big chance of catastrophe, but we're just going to do our best. It's like, no, wait, stand back. Don't do your best yet. First evaluate if it's tractable. And I feel like Anthropic is the one that's most guilty of tractability washing.
Yeah, I think very plausible. Like from an institution design perspective, I think like if you gave me an AI company whose goal is to both advance progress and ensure safety, then like one of the first things that would pop into my head is basically that, hey, maybe yeah, we want to really ensure the independence of the safety side, so it doesn't like feel the need to be to like have opinions that are compliant with what the progress side wants. And then if you take that logic to its end conclusion, then basically what you get is that the company should just take like a third or a half of its treasury and just like plump it into a totally independent, like nonprofit whose job is to like critique both the remaining progress division of that company and all the other companies from the outside, right? And like this is clearly not the sort of thing that they're doing, right? And this is the sort of thing that they're all moving away from. I mean, as Robin Hanson keeps saying, like human beings are great at rationalization. I mean, but and then on the other hand, like being brave in the context of an organization and just saying like, let's like we wants to do this radical thing that a bunch of people will think is crazy. Like that's hard, but I hope that like people in these companies do get the courage and then try to actually do something like that.
Yeah, they tried to do that at OpenAI with the 20% of the resources.
Right, but that's a team inside of a company, right? And then,
Right,
I mean,
right,
of
right.
course, theoretically, there's a nonprofit, it has a mission, but then, like, we just saw how, like, unfortunately, yeah, as much as I really, like, respect the governance experiment of, like, making hybrid structures that are, like, both profit-making and that have, like, some kind of social mission that actually has teeth, like, I think that particular experiment's definitely, yeah, got worn down over time, and I think, it lasted a decade, and at this point, I just model it as a profit-making entity. And I think the main social value of like basically the all of the nonprofit parts of the governance seems to be that it puts uncertainty into the company, into the corporate structure that scares away investors, that reduces the amount of capital that they have access to, and that's like a very important contribution to AI safety in itself, right? But
Mhm.
even still, it's limited.
So from my perspective, we're kind of locked into this dynamic that's kind of like a race to the bottom, as you say. They're just capitalist actors. But I want to ask you about Dario Amadei's race to the top, right? Because he's basically saying, hey, we're going to do a race to the top. We are going to make a company that people want to join. This is Dario's words. A company that people want to join that engages in practices that people think are reasonable while managing to maintain its position in the ecosystem. If you can do that, people will copy it. What are your thoughts?
This feels like the sort of thing that can work well in some eras, but that breaks down in more chaotic eras. And I think we are going to be in a more chaotic era for the next couple of decades. So I think it's very admirable that he has that sentiment. I think it's great that Anthropic is doing that as opposed to doing what OpenAI is doing or what most of the other companies are doing, but like, is that alone going to be sufficient? I mean, I don't think so, just because I think like the human capability for rationalization is crazy powerful. Human beings are like very strongly influenced by like social factors and incentives and like motivations that correlate with the thing you're in becoming bigger in both monetary and non-monetary ways. And so like it's true for nonprofit things too. And if you want to be sustainable, like you have to come up with a way to actually give yourself incentives that are aligned with yourself doing the right thing. And like, I haven't seen OpenAI doing that yet. I mean, if they do that, then, like, that would be amazing, and that would make me much happier.
So when I heard Dario's race to the top, I was just asking myself, like, what is the game theory of race to the top? Because I thought it was race to the bottom. Can you really just flip it? And my conclusion is just that it's like what he's saying does have a kernel of truth. Like when Anthropic comes out with like, hey, let's have responsible scaling policies, or like, just ideas they have, or like let's do some research and poke at our AIs and do mechanistic interpretability. Like all of that stuff can be part of the game theory equilibrium if it's like free or cheap. Right. So
Right,
so essentially
exactly.
like Pareto improvements, right? That's basically what he's pitching.
Yeah, well, like the way that I would kind of steel man the case is basically that like top talent wants to be part of making the world better and not making the world worse, and like what like actual top talent is often very willing to take large salary cuts in order to be part of that kind of thing. And
Hmm.
so if they do that, then like that can actually attract top talent. And like I actually think Ethereum itself, like its success has been to a large part because of that, right? Like Ethereum is like the thing in the crypto space that really, yeah, tries hard to stick to the ideals, to be, yeah, decentralized, to value open source, to value security, to value things like censorship resistance. When there's a lot of blockchains that try to cut corners for the sake of like speed and enterprise deployment and consumer use cases. And like it does somehow happen that despite Ethereum being one of the more ideological of the bunch, it just keeps succeeding. And like I
Hmm.
think like that effect is probably a big part of the reason why. But the question is like, are you operating in a regime where that kind of pressure is decisive, or are you not? And I think like blockchains are very coordination dependent, and so that can work. I think AI is much more is less like a community and more like a tool, and so that kind of pressure is probably somewhat lower. So I mean, both like less optimistic there, but also yeah, like it's definitely very glad that the Anthropic people are thinking in that direction.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I forgot about that. What you're saying about like, well, look, if you want to attract the best talent and the talent has these opinions, then you're getting a win. So it's you can get paid essentially and better talent when you're racing to the top. So yeah, I mean I got to give Dario credit for having a kernel of truth to what he's saying. And the question is just like, how much does it fight the race to the bottom? I would argue not much. But anyway, okay. So last topic for you. We've gone object level. I think it was very interesting to contrast our views. I don't see a huge gap between our views. Like I said, the crux is just like how plausible we think it is that things will go at like a manageable, decentralized defensive pace, right? So you seem like significantly more optimistic, but I think we can. It feels like it's not crazy to think that one of us over time will update toward the other, right?
Hmm. I think so.
Okay, so bringing it home here, I want to just zoom out here, go meta level, and talk about the discourse.
Mm.
You are very much an accelerationist in terms of inventing top tier crypto stuff, being on the forefront of that. Like you're clearly a pioneer, and yet you really didn't hesitate to point out, like, oh yeah, well if AI is that threatening, we have to consider like pause solution, regulation solution. So you're really showing a lot of like mental flexibility and like non-ideologicalness, right? And just openness in a way that when I go on social media and I look at the discourse there, I just don't really see that, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think like those are ideals that I definitely consciously strive for. I think like there are virtues that I've like recognized as virtues definitely since I joined like or was reading the sequences and Scott and also other things as well, and it's like everything that I was looking at when I was a teenager. So I think though, like, those things are important to me. I think, if, we want to get into the question of, like, how can we, make better discourse norms, kind of the norm rather than, something that, depends on individual people, right? And, like, I definitely don't think that, like, over time, I'm immune to any kind of pressures. Then, I think we do have to look at both the incentives in the intellectual environment, but then also ultimately, the social structure, right? Because, like in general, people are very averse to expressing views and then ultimately to holding views that are offensive to their social circles. And this is just an incredibly powerful force. And like a lot of people in AI are, I mean, specifically located in the Bay Area or in social circles where people who are either part of AI companies and people who are investing in AI companies and people who are in the tech industry in general and who really believe in these ideological meme plexes are like really at the center. And when you're in something like that, then like having opinions that kind of escape that is definitely hard. And then, of course, on the other hand, like there's definitely an AI safety bubble as well, and like that's also something that is very geographically concentrated in one place. Like it definitely has. I think there definitely is a pattern that I worry about, where like 10 years ago it was about people who are attracted to ideas, but then now it's over time becoming more and more of like a social cluster that sees itself as a social cluster, and that probably subconsciously biases toward like protecting that social cluster's relevance, right? And so, like, I sometimes actually wonder this interesting question of like, basically, to what extent is like me being sane in the ways that I hopefully am sane, as opposed to me being insane or both of us being insane,
Mhm.
which we have to have non-zero probability for. Actually, just
Yeah.
like a result of me being a nomad and not being in the Bay Area. If more people, like did that, then like, well, would we have more independent thought? And then another big part of it is like just being in the crypto space, which is definitely a tech industry. And so, like you got like it's tech, and you have to learn math and you have to like really be up to date with the math. But at the same time, it's like a different kind of math. And if AI just ends up completely stalling for a century, then that's like actually totally fine for us from the perspective of our own interests, right? So like basically, the value of being disconnected in terms of personal interests is something that like I wonder if that's something that's like
Mhm.
positive, and like we should find ways to try to benefit from more.
This is how I see AI X risk discourse right now. I think that in the larger population, like the average Americans, they're reporting in surveys. You get results like, I don't have the exact number, but it's something like, oh yeah, 70% of people think this is like a moderate to high concern that AI will be like a serious threat and it should be like regulated and slowed down. That's kind of like the default average American opinion, which to be fair, a lot of people aren't even techno optimists in a way that you and I think that they should be. So they're not even necessarily having a problem for the right reasons from our perspective. But I still get the sense that the average person is rightly concerned about AIX risk. But then I go in the tech sphere and I see a lot of ad hominem attacks of AI doomers like myself, people with a high P doom. So let me run some ad hominem attacks by you because I feel like you can defuse the attacks because you have enough credibility as like a tech leader that you can basically shoot down ad hominem attacks from other people in tech. So for instance, is high P doom a fringe position?
I I would say no. I would say, Hypedum is a position that is held by a lot of people within the AI space. I would think among the public in general, probably the one nuance is that there's a lot of people who are pessimistic in ways of like things are going to be medium bad. Like there's a lot of people who's just like general casual vibe is like, oh, the world is going to hell, things are getting worse and worse, and like this could involve things like World War III. It could involve climate change, it could involve misinformation, right? And but then those kinds of people, like they're among them, the probability that like humanity will literally go extinct because of AI by 2040 is more fringe. But at the same time, right, that's like they like are people who I think still align on a lot of important goals, right? And if we talk about like some of the issues that I talked about in terms of AI-driven power concentration, like a lot of them would probably like use different words, but sign on to something very similar. And then even any of these individual issues like dealing with misinformation is part of DIAC, right? And so And at the same time, like dealing with misinformation is just like upstream of having a sane discourse, so that's even able to deal with any of these issues as they arise, right? So I think there definitely are kind of there's differences of opinion between the mainstream and people like ourselves, and then there's differences of opinion between the people like ourselves and accelerationists. And I mean, I think sometimes like all of the different sides have like valid points.
Okay, because today I was on Twitter and I was going back and forth with Grady Booch, who's a well-known software engineer, the inventor of UML, Unified Modeling Language. So definitely a legit guy. But he told me, he said, I posit that yours is the fringe position, but it may seem mainstream to you because you appear to be locked in an echo chamber. Okay, so he is clearly wrong. We're not in an echo chamber. Maybe he's in an echo chamber. Booyah. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I think like there's a kind of fractal effects, right? Where there are echo chambers that we're in, and then those echo chambers exist. But then there's also at the same time particular beliefs that are like actually much more widespread than that, right? And so the average person who believes in AI doom probably has never heard of instrumental convergence before, right? And like if you ask them
Yeah.
why, like they would not repeat that theory, right? And they might even have a different theory, which is like super interesting that we might actually needs to listen to more, right? But they would not have that theory, right? And so I think like bubbles exist, but at the same time, I could definitely like just saying it's a bubble is not some kind of knockdown argument that AI is not worth worrying about.
Right. Okay. So I'll tell you some more ad hominems that I see pretty often, and you can just say yes or no if they're true or not. Okay. Doomers are non builders, they're not in the arena.
I think very false. I think so. First of all, a lot of the people that have signed on to worrying about AI risk, including the statements, including people who have become very big at just talking about this, they're some of the forefathers of the modern machine learning movement. I think also like another thing is that the idea that the doomers are not builders, and that doomers are um, a well-funded influential group. Like those are somewhat incompatible because, like, to be well-funded, the funders have to have built something, right? And like, in I'm concerned about AI, and of course, I've built things in crypto. Jan Tallinn is concerned about AI, and he founded Skype. Then like in Dustin Moscow, it's just like very Like basically like a lot of the early people like in like people who believe in AI risk, whether for the last 20 years or whether for the last 2 years, like are people who have been effective builders in all kinds of places.
Exactly. Yes. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. How about this? No one who actually understands how AI works is a doomer.
I think very false. I think clearly, like people like Eliezer have very deep knowledge. I think more than the average accelerationist in the nuances of how AI works and how things like gradient descent work and how things like transformers and chain of thought work. I think there's people who have spent like years and decades researching AI alignment methods, like the alignment teams at all these AI companies, the kind of people who go out and say like, hey, like PDOOM is 50%, even if their final conclusion is, well, I'm working on it anyway, right? Like these are people who are inside of these labs and who have done a lot of like very deep and nuanced AI interpretability stuff. So no, I think like people who are worried in many cases know a lot about how AI works.
Your lifestyle, you seem like you're very well connected in tech and you're always meeting new groups of people. So when I'm asking you these questions about like, what's fringe, what do people think? It sounds like you're in a good position to answer, right?
In a lot of cases, definitely far from all.
Exactly right. Okay, so this segment is great. I'm glad we're doing it. I mean, that's basically what we do here on Dune Debates. The mission is to just move the Overton window where people are like, "Oh wow, okay, yeah, this is in fact something that respectable people are talking about." Okay, so next ad hominem attack here. Doom is a narrative that big companies use in a bid for regulatory capture.
I think true to some extent. I think if you look at especially the anti-open source kind of meme, I think it's very plausible that a big part of the reason why that meme was so popular and it got adopted so quickly is because there has historically been a strong pro-open source sentiment in tech, and in the absence of safety arguments, there's like a strong line that if you're working on AI that is running in data centers that is concentrated within a few particular companies, then like you're making something like Facebook except something that has an even more intimate, even more invasive impact into people's lives, and that the only ethical thing to do is to work on open source AI that you can run locally, yeah, like potentially run on whatever hardware that you can trust. And it is very convenient that kind of anti-open source safetyism sort of emerged just in time to give people like moral license to go and just make a closed thing that effectively is like Facebook in terms of data slurping capability, but worse, and feel kind of righteous that they're doing the right thing about it. So I do worry about that. Um, but at the same time, I think that's clearly far from what motivates a huge portion of AI safety people, right? Like Jan Tallinn is not someone who is interested in regulatory capture. Okay, if you want like regulatory capture, then like Eliezer Yudkowsky and Scott Alexander are not the ones succeeding at it. Like Curtis Yarvin is, right? And then you ask, well, why hasn't Curtis Yarvin gotten on a doom train more, right? Like there's especially among the intellectuals, like it's very it doesn't feel at all like caring about AI risk is correlated with any kind of power mongering among AI companies. I think like especially some of the sort of pro closed in control and also pro rapid winning the race, which some of which Dario Amade has said like that stuff is definitely, I think, connected to political incentives, and like we should be worried about that.
So, I mean, regulatory capture is basically a way for companies to build a moat. But when I think about these AI giants, the ones who have the most benefit from disingenuous fear mongering, it sounds like they already have a moat in terms of GPUs and capital and talent, right? Like, why would they need to go build this other moat?
I mean, I think that in an emerging industry, it's never clear how big your moat is, right? Like, it's always possible that AI could get commoditized, or LLMs could get commoditized. It's very possible that the value accrual layer is not going to end up being the foundation model layer for various reasons. And then, I mean, there's like regulatory capture, and then there's like, I mean, what I've talked about, like subtler forms of capture, which are basically, just helping your own employees and the public feel good about business models that keep things more closed and concentrated. And like to me, that is a form of capture, even though like that's more about the meme layer than it is about the government. So. I mean, I think the incentives for them to do these things are non-zero, though at the same time, I mean, a lot of the people that have these worries are definitely very sincere about them.
Yep. All right. Last couple ad hominems here. Doom is fake. People don't seriously believe Doom.
Very, very false. I think there's lots of people in a lot of these rationalist circles who really internalize doom, who have psychological mental breakdowns because of doom, who change professions because of doom, who even change personal lifestyle habits because of doom, and like I think do things that are irresponsible, like not like stop saving for retirement. Like I think people should keep saving for retirement, and I actually
Yeah.
even go so far as to say you should not put your entire retirement savings into crypto. Um,
Wow.
but
Good idea.
yeah, no, there are people whose entire pattern of like behavior and demeanor and emotional state just shows like for them this is not an act.
Right. I was going to ask you about, Tyler Cowen is famously questioning. He's saying like, if you look at any AI doomer, their investing or their betting behavior belies that they don't really believe it. But you already answered it. You're saying, well, there's a lot of people who are being kind of irresponsible with their life savings.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, I'm not one of those people right now because I have a 50% PDOOM and I'm still living out the 50% good scenario. So I am saving for retirement. I'm front loading more of my spending than I otherwise would. I'm indulging a little more in the short term and slightly screwing myself in the long term. You know, I'm changing the weight balance of that a little bit, but it's modest. I'm not doing anything extreme. And I've never understood what Tyler Cowen wants me personally to do differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think when when I like read some of the like posts in which he makes these kinds of arguments, a lot of the time, like it is about financial and investing behavior. Like, it is true that buying GPU companies in computer hardware companies stocks in 2020, 2021 was an extremely good idea, right? And from what I understand, it's definitely something that a lot of like AI X risk people did actually effectively capitalize on, though it's also something that a lot of other people have not. Like basically, yeah, I think he like makes arguments like if you have a non-standard belief that something big and crazy will happen, then there always are market consequences of that big and crazy thing, and you should look for them and you should bet on them. And like I think sometimes that's like it's actually not so simple. Like you can't actually predict necessarily what the value accrual layer is going to be. A lot of the time, it's in privately held companies. A lot of the time, like the technology, it just goes in a completely crazy direction. A lot of the time, like total value is high, but marginal value is low, and so it doesn't end up being super investable. A lot of the time, the incumbents end up successfully adapting and capturing a lot of the market value. So I think it's definitely hard to do that kind of thing, but at the same time, like I guess it is a super valuable thought experiment, and like there are situations where people took the market consequences of their beliefs seriously and won big. I think a lot of rationalists did that very well in early COVID, right? Like they, yeah, in
Mhm.
February 2020, actually put a bunch of shorts on things, and when this was back when people were saying like, "Oh, it was only 10 cases last week and it's 100
Right.
cases this week. Like, what's the big deal?" And then they were thinking like, "Wait, what's the function that was that's 10 last week and 100 this week look like?" And then like they realized they basically had to short the global economy, and they did, and it worked extremely well. So yeah, I think like there's merit to his case, but like his arguments, and you should take it seriously. But it's also often not quite that simple.
Yep. All right. Last ad hominem attack. Doom, AI Doom. It's just the rapture for nerds. It's filling the religion shaped hole. It's a doomsday cult.
I think that just doesn't feel realistic from the perspective of like any kind of inside view of the psychology of these people, right? Like the way that I view the psychological journey is basically that they first saw this argument for why AI risk is worth taking seriously. And then they thought about it as a fun intellectual puzzle, and like, ooh, this is a fun intellectual puzzle. Then a few years pass, and then there's no counter arguments to it. Then a few more years pass, and then there's no counter arguments to it. And then a few more years pass, and then they realize, like, wait, this belief is not something about the magical lands of Narnia that I just have as a hobby. This is a belief that makes claims about the world, and the preconditions for the claims that it makes about the world are coming. And then wait, like I actually have to take this seriously. And then wait, oh my God, this is actually inconvenient for a whole bunch of my other ideological preconceptions. And like a lot of the time, it's more like being uncomfortably dragged, kicking and screaming than it is about enthusiastically embracing a religion. Like to the extent that there is something psychologically appealing, I would say it's the idea that you can learn something unique and surprising about the world just by doing math and thinking really hard without being pre-embedded in existing social structures. Like if you had to find something that is kind of appealing about AI risk at at like a non-rational level, I would say it's that. Like I would not say it's doom as a consequence specifically. Like I think it would have appealed to basically the same people, even if it turned out that the outcome of the reasoning was, say, that like Christian theocracy is the correct political system. Like if it turned out that somehow that was the outcome of the of all of these AI risk arguments, then like probably a similar group of people would have bought into them, right? So yeah, I think it's much more about process than about than about the result of the conclusion.
Great. I'm thrilled that you said all that stuff because people really need to hear it. You know, these ad hominem attacks have gone too far. We're just two calm, reasonable people evaluating the arguments for doom. Okay, I think that's a good place to end. So, viewers, I think two really good takeaways from this conversation, from everything Vitalik has been saying, is first, how to be a flexible, non-ideological thinker, weighing the most likely possible futures. I think you can see some insight into how he's processing his PDOOM. He's updated it to 12%. Hopefully, he and I can converge sooner rather than later. But the other thing to observe is how to have high-quality discourse. Like, you don't have to do ad hominem attacks. You can respect both sides. You can respect all the positions. You can say what your crux is, say what it would take to change your mind. And I think this was a tour de force. So thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Liron.
Big thanks to Vitalik for coming on the show. He is the kind of thought leader whose opinion everybody should be wading into their PDOOM and their analysis of how to solve the problem. And so it's meaningful that his PDOOM is at least in the sane zone of greater than 10%. My goal for this show is for more people like Vitalik, more of these really respectable, good thinkers whose opinion matters, more of these people to come on Doom Debates. Let's hear their perspective, debate it against other people's perspective, and try to get closer to the truth before it's too late. I want to create a phenomenon for this show where it's like that 2023 Center for AI Safety letter, where so many people signed it. The analogy would be so many people are coming on Doom Debates that you start to notice, wait, why aren't these last few people signing it? So in the case of that letter, it's like, oh, Jan LeCun, kind of the odd one out for not signing it when you've got people from Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind all signing it. And it's like, oh, okay, Jan LeCun and Mark Zuckerberg didn't sign it, but everybody else signed it. You know, everybody else who matters. That's what I'm looking to create with Doom Debates. I think this is an important enough conversation that it's not enough to be tweeting from your own echo chamber. It's not enough to be scheduling a friendly reporter to come interview you on your terms. We need to do one better when it comes to discourse. And Vitalik really stepped right up. I mean, you saw he and I disagree, 50% versus 12% PDOOM, but he was totally game. He stepped on up. And I think and I hope that this is the beginning of a trend where more discourse is happening on Doom Debates or equally productive debate and discourse forums. Okay, but what about your part as the viewer? If you want to support the show, it's not hard. You just have to go to doomdebates.com, type in your email address. That's the best way to support the show, basically be on that mailing list. That way I can send you special updates, exclusive content. We can build up that cred on Substack. We're feeding the algorithm. You know, Substack recommends it to other people. And then head over to my channel, youtube.com/@doomdebates. Smack the subscribe button there. Read other people's comments, write your own comment, tell us how you're updating, and also open up your podcast player, search for Doom Debates there, write a review. That would be fantastic. So all of these ways you can support the show, which supports better discourse, which brings in great guests. The snowball effect right now is really rolling. We got good momentum. Thanks for watching. See you all here next time on Doom Debates.